welcome everybody, because today everybody is Irish and we're celebrating a great time and opportunity to come together. I want to know, as we gather in Resurrection Parish here at St. Brendan's Inn, I gravitated immediately to our saint who will carry us through this time of joy and laughter and song. And I want to know right away, are you smiling? Because we're leading right into this evening with When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. Please join in as we sing.
There's a tear in your eye, and I'm wondering why, for it never should be there at all. With such power in your smile, such a stone you beguile, so there's never a teardrop should fall. When your sweet lilting laughter like some fairy song, and your eyes twinkle bright as can be, you should laugh all the while, and all other times smile, and now smile a smile for me.
When Irish eyes are smiling, sure it's like the morning spring. In the lilt of Irish laughter, you can hear the angels sing. When Irish eyes are happy, all the world is bright and gay. But when Irish eyes are smiling, sure they steal your heart away.
For your smile is a part of the love in your heart, and it makes even sunshine more bright. Like the linnet's sweet song, crooning all the day long, comes your laughter so tender and light. For the springtime of life is the sweetest of all, and there's ne'er an ill care or regret. And while springtime is ours, throughout all of youth's stars, let us smile every chance that we get.
When Irish eyes are smiling, sure it's like a morning spring. In the lilt of Irish laughter, you can hear the angels sing. When Irish eyes are happy, all the world is bright and gay. But when Irish eyes are smiling, sure they steal your heart away.
If you're still smiling, we thank St. Brendan and the inn here for a wonderful opportunity to sing and to be joyful. We now have a moment of prayer. As we are Resurrection Parish, we do pray. And so we like to pray this wonderful prayer of how the Irish had the challenge of leaving their homeland and going off across the ocean. So take a voyage with us this evening as we gather in prayer as well as in song and dance as we continue this evening. St. Brendan's Prayer. Shall I abandon, O King of Mysteries, the comfort of home? Shall I turn my back on my native land and look to the sea? Shall I put myself at your mercy without silver or horse, without fame or honor? Shall I throw myself upon you without sword or shield, without food, without a bed? Shall I say farewell to my beautiful land and place myself unto you? Shall I pour my heart to you, confessing my sins and begging forgiveness with tears streaming down my face? Shall I leave the prints of my knees on the sandy beach, a record of my final prayer in my own native land? Shall I then suffer every wound the sea shall inflict? Shall I take my tiny boat across the wide, sparkling ocean? O King of glorious heaven, shall I now go of my own choice to the sea?
Continuing our Spirit of Irish music, tonight we have a local artist, Mark Burr, my nephew, will lead us in Irish songs throughout the evening. Tonight he begins with the Wild Rover. Step back and enjoy this music or sing along.
I've been a wild rover for many a year, and I spent all my money on whiskey and beer. But now I'm returning with gold in great store, and I never will play the wild rover no more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more. I went into an alehouse I used to frequent, and I told the landlady me money was spent. I asked her for credit, she answered me nay. For such a custom as yours I can have any day. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more. I then took from my pocket 10 sovereigns bright, and the landlady's eyes open wide with delight. She says I have whiskey and the wines of the best. Yeah, but the words that she told me were only in jest. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never. Go home to my parents, confess what I've done, and I'll ask them to pardon their prodigal son. And when they've caressed me as of oft times before, then I never will play the wild rover no more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more the wild rover. No, never, no more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more.
Although everyone claims to have a little Irish heritage on St. Patrick's Day, we are super pleased to have Julianne Donlon stands with us this evening, born and raised in Ireland, but now lives with us here in northeast Wisconsin, along the shores of Lake Michigan, in the town of Algoma, with her husband Wayne and their 3 children. Julianne, a catechist and a storyteller, recognizes the power of story, just as Jesus did, in deepening our faith and our connections to our Lord. Tonight we're going to take a deeper look at St. Patrick, the man, the myth, the legend, and most importantly, the saint.
Hello everyone, Lá Bratla Fárig, which is the Irish for Happy St. Patrick's Day. It's so good to be here with you today. Let's talk a little bit about St. Patrick, about his life, and about all the stories that we hear about him. Are they true? Are they not true? So let's get one out of the way right away. A lot of people, when they think about St. Patrick, they hear 2 things: shamrocks, and then there's another S, which is snakes. And there's this great legend of St. Patrick driving snakes out of Ireland, but I'm here to tell you, as an Irish woman, and a study of history will reveal, there has never been snakes in Ireland. So where did that legend come from? Well, let's talk a little bit about St. Patrick, and we'll get there. So St. Patrick was actually born in Roman Britain. What? He wasn't even born in Ireland? I know, I hear this a lot. He was the child of a Roman official, and we know that he was born somewhere. Some people will claim him for Wales, some people will claim him for Scotland. So what's the truth? We're not exactly sure. He is a very interesting character in that, as the son of a Roman official, he would have been very wealthy, very well off, But we do know that about the age of 16, his life took a dramatic turn for the worse. St. Patrick was actually kidnapped and was forcibly removed from his family and brought to Ireland actually by Irish slave traders. So St. Patrick, not being native to Ireland, ended up in a foreign country, didn't speak the same language, and ended up in a place called Slamish, which is in the northern part of Ireland, on a mountain, tending pigs. That was actually St. Patrick's job. He tended pigs for a slave master called Mcgilka, who was known to be incredibly cruel and subjected Patrick to abuse and severe beatings. So that's the reality of St. Patrick's life. I'll tell you another little secret about him. St. Patrick, his real name wasn't Patrick either, right? Mind blown. His real name was Maewyn Succat, and he came to have the name St. Patrick through a very, very interesting twist of events. St. Patrick, when he was on Slamish tending pigs, had a lot of time on his hands, and he will tell you himself in his writings that his mind started turning to God. Who was God? What did God mean for his life? And he started to pray that God would save him from the beatings and the abuse he suffered. He eventually got the word from God to travel 200 miles across Ireland and take a boat back home, which he did, and was reunited with his family. You can imagine how relieved and thankful his family was. Patrick was home. But God wasn't done with St. Patrick and called Patrick to priesthood. St. Patrick left for Europe, studied as a priest, and then took on a mission to go back and preach the gospel, preach the love of Jesus Christ to the very, very same people who had enslaved him. We're told that his first convert was Mcgilka. You might remember that name because that was the name of the slave master who enslaved Patrick. So Patrick was an incredible human being. If you look at Ireland, you're going to see about 3,000 holy wells, just natural phenomena where people were baptized outside. Many of them are known to be associated with St. Patrick because St. Patrick would go by springs and would be outside and he would baptize people. And as he was baptizing them, he would tell them about Jesus Christ, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit, the Holy Trinity, the three in one, the one in three. And that is where the legend of the shamrock came in. Not a four-leaf clover. St. Patrick used the shamrock to introduce the Trinity to the Irish who had never heard of the Trinity before. So where did the snakes come in? Well, when St. Patrick came back to Ireland, he obviously was very familiar with the Irish, having been there for many years, encountered the Druids. And the Druids were the pagan chiefs of Ireland. And St. Patrick went about converting them. And the snakes that were driven out of Ireland was the darkness of unbelief as St. Patrick brought the light of Christ to the Irish. He's a fascinating human being, a fascinating saint, and it's just such a shame that there's so little known about him. So you might be asking, where did I get some of this information? We have two sources of St. Patrick's life. The first one is called The Letter to King Coroticus, and the second is his Confessio. Both were written by his own hand. And so I want to share with you, as you continue your celebrations for Lá Fhéile Pádraig, or St. Patrick's Day, one of my favorite prayers of St. Patrick. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. By the rowan and the briar, by the raging forest fire, by the sky that's lightning torn, by the moon that's newly born, I bind my feeble soul to thee, Almighty Son and Spirit three. Amen. Name the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hope you have a fantastic St. Patrick's Day celebration, and as we say in Ireland, sláinte, which means good health or cheers.
Next, we have a wonderful story to be told through Tim Finnegan's Wake. Here's Mark Burr again.
Tim Finnegan lived in Walcott Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd. He had a brogue so rich and sweet, all eyes in the world he carried a hat. You see, the sort of the tippler's way, with the leper that like a poor Tim was born. Help him on and with his work each day, the drop of the crather every morn. Whack the down out and see a partner, whack the floor, you'd rather shake. Wasn't it the truth that told you lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake? One morning Tim felt rather full, his head felt heavy which made him shake. He fell from the ladder and he broke his skull. They carried him home, his corpse to wake. They rolled him up in a nice clean sheet and they laid him out upon the bed with a bucket of whiskey at his feet and a barrel of porter at his head. Whack for the down out and see a partner, whack the floor, you shredder shake. One day to the truth, I tell you, it's up on at Finnegan's wake. His friends assembled at the wake and Mrs. Finnegan called for lunch. First she brought in tea and cake, then pipes, tobacco and whiskey punch. Pity O'Brien began to cry, such a nice clean corpse did you ever see? Tim of Orr, and why did you die? Or shut your cup, says Paddy McGee. You whack for the down out and see your partner, whack the floor, you shredder shake. One day to the truth, I tell you, that's up on at Finnegan's wake. Then Maggie O'Connor took up the gob. Oh, Biddy, says she, you're wrong, I'm sure. Biddy gave her a pelt in the gob and left her sprawling on the floor. And then the word it soon engaged, woman to woman and man to man. Shillelagh law was all the rage, and a row and a ruction soon began. Whack for the down out and see your partner, whack the floor, yet trotter shake. One day to the truth, I told you, lots up on it, Finnegan's wake. Then Mickey Maloney ducked his head when a bucket of whiskey flew at him. It missed him falling on the bed, the liquor scattered over Tim. Dear God, he revives, see how he rises, Timothy rising from the dead. Whipping your whiskey round like blazes. Thunder and Jesus, yeah, I think I'm dead. Whack for the down now, dance here, partner, whack the glorious shredder shake. One day to the truth, I told you, lots up on at Finnegan's wake. Whack for the down now, dance here, partner, whack the glorious shredder shake. One day to the truth, I told you, lots up on at Finnegan's wake.
What is a huge Irish spider called? Paddy Longlegs.
What's an Irish celebration without a few games? Let's check in and see how the staff are going to do in their big competition.
1, 2, 3, go!
I'm done. I'm get mine already.
Just stay close to it. All right.
Just gotta finish this.
Hang on,
Now we have the final match here.
here we are.
Here we go. Final match between you two.
I'm tired. Boy, don't be that hard then, Tony. You like your logo.
Like a cycle. The competitive symbol.
Hi, it's such a privilege to introduce my longtime friend, Mark Mcgilka. As many of you know, Mark is a parishioner, lives just down the block from Resurrection Parish. He and his wife, Barb, have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. He is a longtime diocesan employee, now retired. He was in the area of parish planning and is known around the country for parish planning expertise and writing books and speaking on that topic. Mark is an expert pickleball player, and many of you may not know that he is a PhD in mixology. And so for our Go Bragh celebration, he's going to mix us 2 drinks, 1 alcoholic and 1 non-alcoholic. Enjoy.
God help me, I'm Mark, and since it's Irish, Mcgilka, and I am married to a Barb O'Neill. So, we have some Irish roots. I was invited to make a special beverage treat for St. Patrick's Day. And the treat that we came up with, there's 2 of them. And the first one is for the kids, because after all, the kids always come first. And to make it very easily, all you do is take your favorite blender, throw in a couple of scoops of lime sherbet, which sounds kind of boring, but then you fancy it up with sparkling water, no less than Pellegrino. Nothing's too good for the kids. And you just put a dab in there, like that. Put the top on, and put this thing on, and we're done. For the kids, use the fancy glasses. They deserve it. And there you go. You got their Irish treat. And while they're having fun, enjoying all of that, then you can craft the adult beverage. This is called an Irish flag shooter. And the ingredients are cream de mint, Irish cream. You can use, Bailey's, or I prefer St. Brendan's. It's half the price. And Grand Marnier. And you start with a shooter shot glass. And I already put the first ingredient in. Now the trick to this drink, to make it come out perfectly, is using a spoon. And so that the next drink or level in this drink is you slowly, ever so slowly, in fact they even recommend using a shot glass. I just use these plastic glasses, and as you can see, the Irish cream sits right on top of the cream de mint, and then I put Grand Marnier in the next one, and you get the next level. And if you haven't figured it out, what we have here is the Irish flag. And so, you enjoy. This is not a drink that you sip, because then you get this mouthful of green Marnier and a little bit of the cream and then the cream de mint, and as it may sound, this is less than agreeable. Trust me that when you drink it properly, it's delicious. So, an Irish toast. May your neighbors respect you, trouble, neglect you. The angels protect you, and may heaven accept you. Over the lips, over the gums, look out stomach, here it comes. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Mark, for those drink ideas. We're going to try one of them for sure. Now let's go back to some more Irish music with Mark Burr. This one's called The Holy Ground.
I do to you, my Dinah, 10,000 times I do. For we're going away from the holy ground, and the girls we all love true. We will sail the salt sea over, and we'll return for shore to see again the girls we love and the holy ground once more. Fine girl you are, you're the girl I do adore, and still I live in hopes to see the holy ground once more. Fine girl you are, and now the storm is raging, and we are far from shore, and the crude old ship is tossing about, and the rigging is all torn. You're the secrets of my mind, my love. You're the girl I do adore, and still I live in hopes to see the holy ground once more. Fine girl you are, you're the girl I do adore, and still I live in hopes to see the holy ground once more. Fine girl you are, and now the storm is over, and we are safe and well, and go into a public house and we'll sing and drink like hell. And we'll drink strong ale and porter, and we'll make the rafters roar. And when our money is all spent, we'll go to sea once more. Fine girl, you are the girl I do adore, and still I live in hopes to see the holy ground once more. Fine girl, you are the girl I do adore, and still I live in hopes to see the holy ground once more.
Such an honor to introduce my longtime friend Betty Mannion from Wapaka, Wisconsin. Betty is now a retired director of religious education from St. Mary Magdalene Parish in Wapaka. She's also a Midwest-known storyteller, professional storyteller, who's told stories all over Wisconsin and all over the Midwest. Betty's married to Bill, her husband. Together they have 4 children and many, many grandchildren. Today, Betty is going to tell a story that is going to touch your hearts. Enjoy.
Many of us have ancestors that came from different countries across the big pond, as they call it. And many of us have relatives that came from Ireland. And the hardships that many people had to go through on that journey over, I think, are those beautiful family stories that we should cherish. This story that I'd like to share with you is called Good Morning Mom. And the story was actually inspired by a master storyteller called Milbrae Birch, who was commissioned to write this story for, I don't want to give it away, for a landmark. So without further ado. Be quiet with you now. I don't want to be hearing another sound out of you. The angels are watching over you, and they'll be reporting back to me in the morning about your behavior. Children, they're the death of you. They never listen when you tell them to, and they're always laughing and giggling behind your back. Well, as a child, I didn't. Well, maybe sometimes I did, but it was always difficult to tell when Mom was upset with us because she had these beautiful Irish eyes, and they were always glowing and sparkling whenever she talked. But I never saw them glow or sparkle as much as they did the day that Da came home from the docks. And Mom met him at the door, and she said, Patty, the sign in town said that the ships will be coming to Galway Bay in the springtime, and they'll be taking anyone to America that wants to go. America, just think of it, Patty, the land of the free and the brave, where I hear the streets are paved in gold. Well, that whole winter, Mom and Da saved our passage to America, which was no easy job. And by day, Da would haul in the heavy nets of Galway Bay. And by night, by the light of a single candle, Mum would spin the beautiful yarn of Ireland. And bit by bit, the coins in the chip teapot on the shelf accumulated, and by springtime they had saved our passage to America. I'll never forget the morning that we left. We all stood in front of the sod cottage out in front, and Mum had us all line up. We had our arms around each other, and she said, as we looked at the cottage, she said, now be saying goodbye to this home, because the home that we'll be having in America is much grander and larger than this one. And so our family stood there, huddled together, looking at the only home that we had ever known before, and hoping for the grand home that we had heard about in America. Well, we made our way down to the dock, and as we stood there, sure enough, there was the ship moored in the dock. It was larger than anything that I had ever seen before, and there were men climbing around the masts like monkeys. Well, we made our way up a narrow gangplank, and when we got to the top of the gangplank, a man with a dirty, smelly beard and yellow teeth had a big book in his hand, and he wrote our names in those books, and he looked us over from head to toe like we were animals. And he looked at Da and the boys, and he said, the men can go that way. And he looked at Mum and me and the babes, and he said, and you can be going this way. Well, Mum looked at Da, and she said, Patty, we've never been separated a night in our lives. And he looked at her and said, you'll be doing just fine. And then he looked at me, and with a twinkle in his eye and his finger up in the air, he said, now, Kathleen, you'll be helping your Mum with the babes. Ah, Da, I say. I knew this wouldn't be difficult, for after all, I was a big girl of 10 years old. Well, Mom and the babes and I made our way down, down, down into the bowels of the ship. And the room that we entered wasn't the grand stateroom that we had told we'd be having. Instead, it was a big room with bunks piled 3 high and a dirty privy pot in one corner and a pot of broth in the other. And we looked around ourselves in horror. And Mom gathered her wits around her, and she picked up her skirts. And she looked at me and she said, "Kathleen, you be coming along behind me." And she made her way down that aisle like she was the Queen of England. Well, she made her way to our bunk, which was the middle bunk of 3. And by day, Mom and I and the wee babes played in that bunk, and at night we slept in that bunk, huddled together for warmth, except for one glorious hour every day when they'd let us all up onto the decks. And there we were with the wind blowing our hair and our skirts. We could run and play while the mums and das cuddled in the corners. Well, the journey was long and hard, and the seas were very rough. And then the fever came. Black fever, they called it. And I remember hearing the moaning and the crying that went on in the bunks at night as the mums and the babes cried out in pain. And then one night I was awakened by my own dear mum, and she was moaning in the bunk right alongside me. And her eyes were rolling back in her head, and she was talking like she was crazy or something, and she kept saying, Kathleen, you be watching out for the babes." "Aye, Mum," I said. "The babes are right here." And with horror, I could see that her brow was covered with sweat and her eyes were rolling back in her head. And I laid down on top of her with every bit of hope I had in my 10-year-old body that she would see the shores of America. Well, it was only 3 days later that I was awakened in the night by the lady in the bunk above us. And she was gently nudging my shoulder, and she said, "Kathleen, child, you be getting the wee little ones now, 'cause your mum has gone to heaven and she's one of God's angels now." And I looked in horror as Mum's eyes were glazed and just looking up at the ceiling. And I watched as the ladies lovingly combed her long hair and they wrapped her shawl around her. And I watched as they gently lifted her from the bunk. And the babes and I followed as they carried her up to the steps, to the deck, where Da and the boys met us. And with a song and a prayer, I watched as they slipped my dear mum into the sea. Well, it was only 2 days later that our ship reached the shores of America, and I was awakened in the morning by the sound of the lapping of the waves against the ship that was much gentler than the waves that we had heard when we were crossing the ocean. And we all gathered up on the deck of the ship, and Da and the boys were there, and so our small family, without Mum, huddled together as we watched in the darkness as the dawn started to bloom. And as the sun started to lift, you could see that there was a city standing in front of us with tall buildings, the likes of which I had never seen before. And there was a lady standing out in the water. She was a huge lady. And Da stood at the deck and at the rail, and he held on and he looked at me and he said, Kathleen, child, I want you to be saying good morning to your mum." "Da," I said, "have you gone daft? We left Mum behind." And he looked at me and he said, "Child, I said you be saying good morning to your mum." I said, "Da, she's gone." He said, "Your mum is standing out there. You see her standing out there in the water." And I looked at him and said, "Dad, are you daft? She's not out there." And then I looked, because as the fog was starting to lift, sure and indeed, there standing in the harbor was a lady, a tall lady. She was larger than anything that I had ever seen before, and she held a book held to her breast, like Mum did at night when she would stand in our doorway and say, "The angels are watching over you." And she had a crown on her head. And as I looked at her, I thought, she does look like Mum, just like she did at night in our doorway. And Da looked at me and he said, "You see that book she's holding?" I said, "Yeah, Da." He said she's going to be writing our name in that book, each and every one of our names. And she's going to be caring for us just like your own dear mum did in Ireland before we came here. "Aye, Da," I said. And so, with the wind blowing my hair, and with the tears rolling down my cheeks, and with my skirts flipping in the breeze, I looked up at Da, and I looked at the statue, and I clung onto that rail with every bit of hope and love that I had in my body. And I looked up and said, "Good morning, Mom."
Thanks for the wonderful story, Betty. Irish dancing is an integral part of Irish culture. But did you know that there are numerous different forms of Irish dance? Next up, we have Cullen, a 12-year-old Irish dancer. She dances out of Kinsilla Academy of Irish Dance of Milwaukee and the Fox Cities. Cullen, who is an open champion dancer and is ranked 6th in the Mid-America region, will perform a number of traditional Irish dances for you. She will dance the soft shoe dances called the reel and the slip jig. She'll also dance the hard shoe dances with all those clicks called the hornpipe and the treble jig. Lastly, Cullen will dance a non-traditional set called the drunken bogger and a medley of treble reels. Take it away, Cullen.
am so super excited to invite you to come over to my mom's house as she makes Irish soda bread. It is a tradition in our house, being McAllister's, that every St. Patrick's Day, my mom makes corned beef and cabbage, Irish soda bread, potatoes, and of course, Guinness cupcakes with Bailey's ice cream frosting. So join us as we head out to Mill Center and go to my childhood home and make Irish soda bread. And if you want to follow along or make it later, we'll have the recipe online for you.
My name is Anna, and my dear daughter Katie talked me into making this video to show you how to make Irish soda bread. 100 years ago, I was at a Tupperware party and a lady had a simple recipe for Irish soda bread. So that was my introduction to soda bread, Irish soda bread. And a lot of people probably think that it originated with the Irish, but it didn't. It was originated with the Native Americans. And they had ash from wood that they used as a leavening because they didn't have yeast then. So they used that to raise the bread. But then the Irish in about 1830s got onto that idea, and in that time it was a lot of famine going on. I don't know if that was a potato famine, but there was famine, and so they needed something to eat, so they made bread and they used the cheapest, most common ingredients. So really there's about 4 ingredients. There's flour, salt, soda, well they do put sugar in, and then they use sour milk, but I use buttermilk. And that became their staple. Okay, so this recipe is real simple. Some people put raisins and currants and caraway seeds and all that in there, but I don't. And I make a double recipe, and I'm Polish, so I'm used to putting it in a bread pan, but I'll make the round loaves just for you. Okay, so then we need to have 4 cups of this flour, because I'm doubling the recipe that I was given, because the grandkids and the kids like the soda bread. Okay, I got the 4 cups of flour now, and then I need 1 teaspoon of salt. I just take it out of the salt shaker because it's easier for me. And 1 teaspoon of the baking soda. And then 2 tablespoons of sugar, which is 1/8 cup. Then I need 2 cups of this buttermilk. Okay, and then you just add that right in there. Just mix it until you get all the dry ingredients dampened. Now I put some parchment paper on here, and I have the oven already heated. Now I can make 1 big loaf, or I can make 2 smaller ones. I think I'll make 2 smaller ones. Now, you don't have to get very fussy with this because it's supposed to be rustic anyway. And traditionally it's made in round loaves like this. And you can kind of spread it a little bit so it cooks evenly. Okay, now the old folk tale was that you're supposed to put like a cross on the top but I never did that before. The cross keeps the devil out while the bread is baking, and then it's to give thanks also, bless the bread and give thanks. But some believe that the cross lets the fairies out, and then it protects you from bad luck, because the fairies are bad luck. Okay, that's all there is to that, and then we just put it in the oven. And bake it until it's nice and crispy. Probably about 45 minutes. Okay, now we will check our bread. It's been longer, but I had a slower oven. So you just put a toothpick in. Yes, it comes out clean. Okay. There is our bread. And the crosses didn't show up. Whatever. It must have been them leprechauns got in there.
How can you tell if a potato is not from Ireland? When it's a French fry.
Tooraloo, tooraloo. The small bird sat on the ivy bunch, and the song he sang was The Jug of Punch. And here's Mark Burr again.
One pleasant evening in the month of June, as I was sitting with my glass and spoon, a small bird sat on an ivy bunch, and the song he sang was the jug of punch. Tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay, tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay. A small bird sat on an ivy bunch, and the song he sang was the jug of punch. What more diversion can a man desire than to sit him down by a snug turf fire? Upon his knee a pretty wench, ironed on the table a jug of punch. Tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay, tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay. Upon his knee a pretty wench, ironed on the table a jug of punch. Let the doctors call with all their art, they'll make no impression upon my heart. Even the cripple forgets his hunch when he's snug outside of a jug of punch. Tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay, tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay. Even the cripple forgets his hunch when he's snug outside of a jug of punch. And if I get drunk, well, the money's me own, and if them don't like me, they can leave me alone. 'Cause I'll tune me fiddle and I'll rustle me bow, and I'll be welcome wherever I go. Tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay, tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay. I'll tune me fiddle and I'll rustle me bow, and I'll be welcome wherever I go. And when I'm dead, I end in my grave. No costly tombstone will I have. Just lay me down in my native peat, with a jug of punch at my head and feet. Tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay, tooraloo-raloo, tooraloo-ralay. Just lay me down in my native peat, with a jug of punch at my head and feet.
Next up, we have our two leprechauns competing for the joy of winning. Let's check it out.
All right, Susan,
On
you
your
wanna-
mark. Get set. Go. That might fear you're losing. Oh, that was a double clinker.
Oh, okay, two, huh? So, how many you got?
4. They have to have 7. He's got One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You got 7, so it's not my note. Gotta get those pants on.
Shoot.
One more, Father Time, come on.
Oh my God, these are short. I'm drowning. Welcome back to another story by our professional storyteller, Betty Mannion. As you may know, Irish people always seem to have another story, and Betty has one for you today.
This story is an Irish folktale. It's popular in Ireland, and there's actually many different versions of the story. The version I'm going to tell for you today is called Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. Now, in Ireland, they sometimes call potatoes pratties, so you might be hearing me use that word a bit as I'm telling the story. But the moral of this story is that sometimes taking the easy way out isn't always the best idea. Jamie O'Rourke was the laziest man in all of Ireland. He never wanted to get out of bed in the morning because he always complained that his back was breaking into two. And what he hated most of all was digging potatoes. Even though potatoes were Jamie O'Rourke's favorite food, he hated to get out of bed to dig in his tiny garden for those puny potatoes that he grew. Now, Jamie O'Rourke had the most lovely little wife named Eileen O'Rourke. And because Jamie wouldn't get his body out of bed in the morning, poor little Eileen O'Rourke would have to go outside every day to their tiny little garden, and she'd prune, and she'd hoe, and she'd water, and she'd plant, and she'd harvest those puny little potatoes that they ate. Well, one morning, like every other, Jamie O'Rourke sat in his bed and he said, "Eileen, dear, I'm not getting out of bed today because my back is surely breaking in two, so you're going to have to go out into that tiny little garden of ours and do the plowing and the picking." So Eileen O'Rourke, mad as could be, but just like every other day, went out into the garden. And lo and behold, as she was hoeing and plowing and plucking those potatoes, she hurt her back. Well, she made her way into the house and she said to her husband, "Jamie, get out of the bed, dear, because I need to get into it because surely my back is splitting in two with all the work that I've done in our teeny little garden." Jamie O'Rourke got out of the bed, and sure enough, little Eileen got into the bed, and he thought, now what? We're going to starve, surely. All the saints in heaven are going to watch us starve because Eileen is in bed. Well, 2 days went by, and Jamie kept pacing back and forth in the house, not knowing what to do, because surely he was starving because they had no food. Why, even the cat and dog didn't have any food. The mice were left the house even because they were starving. And so Jamie finally realized, saints be preserved. Sooner or later, death is going to be knocking at my door, and I better make my final confession to Father O'Malley before death is knocking at the door. So he left poor, sweet Eileen O'Rourke in that bed, where all the women in the village were happy for her, and they said, St. Bridget surely, and even the Blessed Virgin Mary must be looking down on her, because Eileen O'Rourke has never had such a nice rest in all the days that she's been married to Jamie O'Rourke. Well, Jamie made his way out of the house, down the hill, in the moonlight, to find Father O'Malley to hear his final confession. And as he made his way down the hill, all of a sudden he heard a little tap, 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 and a singing. Now, you and I know leprechauns, the wee people, come out at night. And Jamie knew that too. And so sure enough, as he crept near that little tapping sound, there in the glen by the light of the moonlight was a wee little man with a little hammer and little nails, and he was tapping at some shoes and singing at the same time. Well, the wee little man was paying such close attention to what he was doing that he didn't see that quick Jamie O'Rourke as he bent down and he picked up that wee little man by his short little coattails and held him up in the air and said, I gotcha, you little leprechaun. Now I want you to give me your pot of gold and I'll set you free. Well, that poor little man just hung there by his coattails, and he was crying out, and he said, oh, please, Mr. Mortal Man, please let me go. You see, I don't have a pot of gold. I'm just a new little cobbler. This is only my second pair of boots that I'm working on. Now, you and I also know that a leprechaun's job is to make little fairy boots and dancing shoes for them. And payback is the fairies pay them, the leprechauns, back with pieces of gold. So the wee little leprechaun was hanging there, and he said, it's my first pair of shoes, and I only have 2 little pieces of gold in my pot. So, Mr. Mortal Man, I can't be giving you those. But how about a wish? Well, Jamie O'Rourke put that leprechaun down on his hand and said, what kind of a wish is it that you'd want to be giving me? And the wee little man said, well, do you like potatoes? Oh, Jamie said, I love potatoes. Why, praties are my favorite food. And the wee little man said, well, I could give you this wee little potato seed, and you could be planting it, and it'll grow into something huge. And Jamie O'Rourke, you'll never be hungry again. Well, Jamie thought about it for a moment and thought, Eileen would be so pleased with that decision. So he said to the wee little leprechaun, I'll take you up on your offer. So sure enough, a little seed was placed in Jamie O'Rourke's hand, and he let that wee little man go. Well, Jamie O'Rourke was so excited to make his way home and tell Eileen O'Rourke about the good fortune that he has had. So he put the potato seed in his pocket and made his way back up the hill to their house. Well, in the morning, when Eileen O'Rourke opened her eyes, he couldn't wait to tell her the good news. And he said, Eileen, dear, you're going to be so proud of me, because saints be preserved, I made the best deal ever with a little leprechaun. Eileen looked at him and said, Jamie, you met a leprechaun, did you? Did you get the pot of gold? Jamie said, well, darling, that's where the story comes, you see. 'Cause no, I outsmarted that leprechaun. I didn't want his 2 pieces of gold. Instead, I took this potato seed. Potato seed, she said. Jamie O'Rourke, you are not only the laziest man in Ireland, you are the most foolish indeed. You took a potato seed instead of 2 pieces of gold. Shame on you, Jamie O'Rourke. Jamie O'Rourke didn't know what to do. He knew his lovely wife, Eileen. She was upset with him, and she was still in bed because her back hurt in 2 places, you know. So he had nothing else to do, so he went out into their tiny little garden, and he planted that seed into the garden. And he watered it, and he watered it, and he watched, and sure enough, it started to grow grow into a beautiful potato plant. Jamie was so excited. And then finally underneath the plant started to grow a potato. And it got bigger and bigger, and it came above the ground, and it came farther above the ground, and it got to the edge of their wee little garden. And then it reached the garden shed, and then it started to tip the garden shed over, and lo and behold, it started to tip their sod cottage over. Well, Eileen O'Rourke, she came out of the house, and she said, "Jamie, look at this giant potato, now what?" He said, "Well, I think it's time to harvest it, dear Eileen." So he got a hoe, and he got a shovel, and he got a brick. He got anything he could to dig that giant potato out of the ground, and it wouldn't budge. So he got a beam and a rock, and he tried to wedge it out. Still, the potato wouldn't come out of the ground. Well, the people in the village started to hear about this, particularly Father O'Malley. And so the whole village started to come up, and Father O'Malley looked at the potato. He said, "Oh, Jamie O'Rourke, look at what you've gone. Look at what you've done. Look at what you've grown. Why, saints be preserved, it's a miracle, surely it is." So he said, "But how are we going to get it out of the ground?" And so he gathered all the people of the parish, and they came with their shovels and their hoes and their rakes and anything that they could find. And they all started to dig at the potato. They shoved and they hoed and they made noises and they grunted and groaned, and the potato would not move. Well, finally, all at one time, they put their shovels into the ground and gave that potato one big dig, and it flew right up into the air and started to roll down the hill. And the people in the village watched in horror as this giant potato is rolling down the hill, right down the center of the lake. Well, and when it got to the bottom of the hill, there it got lodged right in the middle of the road between two stone hedges. Now what were they going to do? The constable came to Father O'Malley, and he said, "Father, we've got a problem here." Father indeed believed that they had a problem there, so he prayed to all the saints in heaven and said, "I need some guidance here. What should we do?" Well, sure enough, he got a brainstorm, and he said, "Jamie O'Rourke, this is your potato, so why don't you figure it out, how to get it out of the road?" Poor Jamie didn't know what to do. He stood there scratching his head. Well, dear Eileen O'Rourke stood at the top of the hill, and she said, "Jamie, there's enough potato for everyone." Oh, that wise Eileen. So sure enough, Father O'Malley said to all the people in his parish, "You go home and you get all your knives and anything you have that cuts." And so they all came back with their utensils, and they all climbed on top of that potato, and they cut and they sawed and they did everything they could. They carved that potato into hundreds of little bits, and they all took that home. And over that winter, all the people in the village and the parish had enough potato to eat. Oh, they had potatoes for breakfast, they had potatoes for lunch, and they had potatoes for dinner for months and months. And finally, when springtime came, the people in the village said, "We can eat no more potatoes." But Jamie O'Sullivan, what did he do? He had saved one little eye from that giant potato. And in springtime he said to dear sweet Eileen, "I'll be planting that seed now in the garden." When people of the village heard that, they all came up that hill and they said, "Jamie O'Rourke, you may not plant that eye of that potato. We'll make you a promise. We promise that we will take care of you and your sweet wife Eileen for the rest of your life. We will make sure that you always have food on your table, so you don't need to be growing any more potatoes." Well, Eileen couldn't believe what she was hearing. And Jamie O'Rourke, he was proud as a peacock when he heard that news. And he looked at the people in the village and he said, "I'll be taking you up on that offer. Many thanks for your generosity." And so it turned out that the laziest man in Ireland, Jamie O'Rourke, continued to be the laziest man in Ireland, and he probably is to this day. But his sweet little wife Eileen and he have never been hungry again for a day. And while Jamie might be the laziest man in Ireland, he's not the most foolish man. And that's the end of the story.
At this time, we'd like to thank St. Brendan's Inn for giving us this opportunity to tape here this evening. They have also given us the recipe for their famous root soup. You can find it on our parish website. It is awesome. Take the time and try it out.
Dancing and stories, food and drinks, what a day. Let's go back for some more Irish music with Mark. This one's called The Rocky Road to Dublin.
In the merry month of June, from me home I started, left the curse to me, nearly broken hearted, saluted father dear. Kiss me, darling mother, drink a pint of beer, me grieving tears to smother, then off to reap the corn. Leave where I was born, cut the salt like thorn to banish ghosts, and Dublin's a brand new pair of brogues, renting o'er the bogs, frightening all the dog on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin, whack for all around. In Mullingar that night I rested limbs so weary, started from daylight, my spirits bright and airy, took a drop at the pure to keep me heart from sinking, that's the Paddy's cure. When Eddie's on for drinking to see the lassie smile, laughing all the while at me curious styles, and said she had a bubbling nest if I was hired, wages I required till I was nearly tired of the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin, whack for ram. In Dublin next arrived, I thought it such a pity to be so soon deprived of view of that fine city. Well then I took a stroll all among the quality bundle it was stowed, while in a neat locality something crossed me mind. When I looked behind, no bundle could I find. Upon me stick a wobbin inquiring for the road, said me Connacht Road wasn't much in vogue on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin, whack for lolly ram. When next I got away, my spirits never failed, and landed on the quay just as the ship was sailing. Captain at me roared and said that no room had he. When I jumped aboard, a cabin found for Paddy was down among the pigs, made some bonny rigs and danced some arty jigs. The water round me bubbling, green off all the head, wished myself was dead, or better far instead, on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin, whack for lolly ram. The boys of Liverpool, when we safely landed, called myself a fool. I could no longer stand it, blood began to boil. Temper I was losing, poor old Erin's Isle. They began abusing her army, so I says I'm a shillelagh, I let fly. Galley boys were I, and so I was a hobbling with a loud hooray, joined in the affray, and quickly cleared the way for the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up the hare and turn her down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin, whack for lolly rab.
I want to thank you for joining us. It's been an opportunity to be with St. Brendan at St. Brendan's Inn, as well as with all of us singing, dancing. I hope you enjoyed all the festivities at this time. It's a great time to, again, celebrate who we are in this time of Lent, but also spring coming on. For me, it was definitely worth a glass of Guinness. A wonderful opportunity to come together with the Irish. It's wonderful. So I want to send you off with a blessing, knowing that God gives us, each one of us, on the road to hope and salvation. So let us sing now, and you can sing along with us, the Irish blessing song.
May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always with you. May the sun shine warm you always, till we meet again. May the rain fall softly on you. May the hand of God uphold you. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always with you. May the sun shine warm you always, till we meet again. Christ before you, Christ behind you.
I know